Immunization, what is not used? TT is used or DT is used or DPT is used? DT and DPT, right? So there are 9 preventable diseases, all of you know very well. So we find DT, DPT, hepatitis B, OPV, etc., etc. Then hypertension with hypokalemia, our favorite question. Any excess aldosterone lead to hypertension. Same time it will cause sodium retention, potassium loss leading to hypokalemia. So there is a reason, doctor, end stage renal disease cannot be. What do you find in ESRD and chronic renal failure? Hyperkalemia, not hypo. That's the reason. If there is no corpus callosum, we are more happier individuals because left brain and right brain need not fight with each other as to what they are thinking. Most of the times if there is a dysgenesis of corpus callosum, especially you find that in trisomy 18, trisomy 13, trisomy 8, etc., etc. Non-syndromic presentation is much more common than that of a syndromic presentation, and within the non-syndromic presentation, asymptomatic presentation, only incidentally you have taken MRI and did not find corpus callosum, is more often a feature rather than any kind of neurological deficits is what need to be remembered. Transparency of the cornea, how is it maintained? Luckily fibers, nerve fibers are unmyelinated to permit cornea to watch, and hydration of corneal epithelium, even widely spaced collagen bands. Mitotic figures in fact will cause cornea to become opaque. In certain pathological states they become increased is what need to be remembered. So there are anatomical factors, physiological factors which maintain the corneal transparency, like the avascularity, arrangement of the fibers, single layer of endothelium, etc., etc. The anatomical factors responsible for the transparency of the cornea is what need to be remembered. Furosemide, thiazide, 2 questions on diuretics. Without that there is no question paper, we are all dehydrated, right? So furosemide acts on what? Ascending limb of loop of Henle, and it is a loop diuretic used in congestive heart failure. Sodium potassium 2 chlorides imported in the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle is the point where it will be acting upon. So it doesn't act on proximal. Then only parenteral, we give LAS6. How many tablets? 40 milligram, 2, 3, 4 depending upon the edema. So tablet we give, injection we give. It is very much used in the pulmonary edema. In fact, a patient with left heart failure, only option you don't have anything in the ward. LAS6 is the first thing that comes to your rescue. Then even congestive heart failure we use. So that's the reason there are too many options. C and D is also there. Options are the same, right? Okay. So that means no regrets that 5 mistakes are there in our Sunday test. 5 or 6 printing errors are there, doesn't mean we are in international standard still. If we give totally correct, then we are not in international standard, right? Then thiazides, typically what do they cause? Thiazides are bad for certain things. They can predispose to hyperuricemia. A diabetic patient, if you happen to give thiazide as a diuretic to treat his hypertension, it can cause the glucose control to become abnormal. It is very much used in CCF. Then what is the effect of it on the calcium excretion? Classically, the thiazides are the ones which will lower the urinary calcium excretion. That is the reason, suppose if somebody has lot of calcium in their urine and responsible for the renal stones, you don't want all that calcium to appear in urine and you want it to get reabsorbed at the tubular level, use the thiazides. So that's the reason it is used in order to take care of the nephrocalcinosis, and you can retain that calcium and help in osteoporosis. That's the reason, doctor, for the idiopathic hypercalciuric individuals who are losing calcium and becoming porotic, you can use the thiazides as the part of the management. So the decrease, not increase the calcium excretion would be the option here. On the day of operation, stop metformin, give insulin is considered to be the management of choice. Now this is a favorite question of examiner. Coinard's classification of the liver. So this also requires some amount of proactive. Is it any old topic? Old question topic, huh? Okay, not bad then. So Coinard's classification, there are 8 functionally independent segments into which the liver had been broken down by the basis of the portal vein, hepatic artery, and the bile duct is what need to be basically remembered. Now these segments are basically numbered in a clockwise or counterclockwise. It is typically in the anti, or this is what, doctor? Clockwise, no? Clock will move like this, right? Okay. Then the right border of the liver typically is formed by the segments 5 and 8. And segment 4 is the one which is there in the left part of the hemiliver. So it is a part of the left part of the liver is what need to be remembered. And the caudate lobe is the one which is located in the segment 1 of the liver, which is a potential question shortly. That's the reason left lobe constitutes the fourth segment is what I like to underscore. Persistent fetal lobulation of the kidney. Why does it happen? Is it a normal variant or is it congenital problem? Yes? So basically this adult kidney stripped off its capsule and you find the lobulation. Basically fetal kidney has got 5 lobules and failure of the fusion of them congenitally is the one which is responsible. But it is only a variant, it is only an anomaly, not an abnormality is what need to be recognized. And can anything else also can cause a similar picture that of the lobulated kidney, for which you are worried as a radiologist? Suppose there are recurrent infections, fibrosis, that can cause also a similar lobulation. But there the fissures which are formed are much more deeper compared to the fetal lobulation radiologically. Now on postmortem the kidney shows radial cysts. What is your diagnosis, doctor? It is a case of autosomal recessive polycystic kidney disease where 3 millimeter cysts are presented in a perpendicular fashion. They can have a coexistent periportal fibrosis is what need to be remembered. We will take this question later. Then congenital anomaly where urothelial cancers can be found is exotrophy of the bladder. 400 times there is an increased risk of developing a bladder cancer and a urothelial malignancy. Coming to the genital development, external genitalia typically develop at around 10th week is what has to be fundamentally remembered. A patient with a heart disease, postpartum hemorrhage, oxytocin is not good, oxytocin will rise BP and make heart failure to become worsened, as all of you know. Yes? Ergometrin, oh, that is also there. I mean, preferably you need to not give a cardiotonic drug ideal. Can you give oxytocin in a patient with heart disease? But now between oxytocin and ergometrin, what we clinically give? Generally ergometrin has taken over the oxytocin. Oxytocin were the gone days. Once more ergometrin, cardiovascular morbidity is a contraindication very much. The baby has not passed meconium, meconium ileus is there, what do you want to do next? Typically meconium ileus need to be taken care by doing a bowel enema. But is it with barium? It is not with barium. But barium was given in the options. Yes, probably it went unnoted by them. So water soluble contrast material, gastrographin is the one, and non-ionic contrast like Hypec and Omnipec are the ones which are being used in order to open up and squeeze out the meconium is the one which is commonly done. Now let's go to the next question. Transitional epithelium is found in ureter, bladder, calyces. What is the epithelium that you find in collecting duct, doctor? Simple cuboidal epithelium is the one which is commonly found in the case, you can see the collecting duct over here with the simple cuboidal epithelium most commonly found. So 2 questions on epithelia, doctor. One small list is there. Which part of the body, what epithelium is there? Then gastroesophageal junction, there is a malignancy, adenocarcinoma. Was a transhiatal approach was given? If you are operating, yes? So what do? There are 3 approaches, doctor, in order to resect a adenocarcinoma of the GE junction. You have got a Ivor-Lewis approach, where typically there is a thoracotomy which is being done, and thorax is the one which is being opened up, and then anastomosis is done. The second approach is called as the 3-field esophagectomy, where there is anastomosis which is being done in the neck, and then you have got a transhiatal approach which basically avoids thoracotomy. There is an advantage. The other 2 approaches involve thoracotomy, whereas this does not involve. Why is it important? Suppose a patient of esophageal cancer, gastroesophageal cancer has got a poor lung. You can't afford to do a thoracotomy. So you don't want to touch thorax. Then in that case transhiatal approach is good, where you make an opening in neck, one opening in the abdomen, without touching the chest. So that is the reason, doctor, abdomen and neck are the ones through which you will be approaching in the case of the transhiatal approach. In the case of the gastroesophageal junction malignancy is what has to be fundamentally understood. And what is that approach where abdomen and thorax are involved? It's called Ivor-Lewis operation. And what is McEwan's 3-stage procedure? You also have thorax, abdomen, cervix, or cervical area, both of them are taken. Transhiatal is only abdominal and cervical is what need to be remembered. Now, where are the perforators not present? Generally, the perforators are present in the proximal half of the calf, and they are there along the distal half of the medial side of the leg. So there is a reason they are not located in the distal half of the calf. So by that virtue, D can become a positive answer. Then pericardial pain is basically conducted from the parietal layer of the serous pericardium. It is a phrenic nerve which is responsible for carrying it. Then if you are applying the thoracocentesis, then you pass through the muscles of the intercostal space, and which includes external, internal and innermost and transverses. They are the ones. But transverses will take in superior attachment from the posterior surface of the lower sternum, and then it will be having an insertion into the 2nd to 6th costal cartilages. So based on the origin and insertion, we can guess the needle is passing through which of the muscles. Then what is the FNAC needle's gauge size? Typically it is 23 gauge needle, which falls between 22 to 26 is the size. If there is a fracture of the penis with intact Buck's fascia, penile fractures are a part of what is the underlying cause, doctor? Generally the tunica albuginea has got a very high tensile strength with about 1500 millimeters of mercury of pressure is required for a rupture to happen. So that is the reason generally it is one of the sexual traumas which can cause the penile trauma. So suppose if there is any rent in the Buck's fascia, then that is the point the blood will extravasate into the scrotum, perineum, suprapubic area and form a hematoma. Until the Buck's fascia, which is intact over here, it does not extravasate into the surrounding tissues, is what is underlying point in this question. Duodenal ulcer is there with bleeding. Patient is hemodynamically destabilized. Then in spite of doing endoscopy, it is not controlled bleeding. Then what is the next line of management? There are two things we need to remember about taking care of a bleeding duodenal ulcer. One is elective surgery, other is called emergency surgery. What do we do in emergency surgery when patient is hemodynamically unstable? Most emergent surgical procedures will involve oversewing the ulcer to achieve the hemostasis without doing anything else. Whereas in elective surgeries, you have got the selective vagotomy, Billroth type 1, Billroth type 2, etc., etc. So that is the reason, doctor, it is a removal of the, it is basically the controlling of the bleeder, which is most important when you are doing it as a emergency procedure. But here he has given even pyloroplasty and the elective surgical part. Okay. Ogilvie's syndrome, what is it? It's also called pseudo obstruction. There is no actual organic obstruction, but there is a development of obstructive features. So any recent surgery, electrolyte disturbance, cardiovascular problems, certain medication, narcotics, etc. can cause it. So mechanical obstruction is not a feature of it. Subependymal astrocytoma, what is the common location? Can you tell me which is the neurocutaneous syndrome with which this kind of astrocytomas subependymal are associated? Tuberous sclerosis. So there is a reason, doctor, generally it is a lateral ventricle attached to the caudate head closer to the foramen Monro, not directly originating from Monro. So lateral ventricle is the most common location where it will be originating, but it will be obstructing the flow through the foramen of Monro, and commonly the subependymal astrocytomas are associated with tuberous sclerosis. In Reye's syndrome, what do you classically find? We definitely find glycogen depletion, no doubt about it. But we also find mitochondrial swelling. So which is the more appropriate answer in this question? So it will show microvascular vesicular steatosis, glycogen depletion, and pleomorphic swollen mitochondria. They are all the features in the case of the Reis syndrome. Patient has got a respiratory problem, cystic fibrosis is there, which is suggested by the chloride test. Then what is the best way that you can confirm it? DNA assessment of the CFTR mutations is a way by which you can confirm, but even if it is negative, that does not rule out there is a problem with the CFTR genetic analysis. How about the nasal potential difference measurement in the diagnosis of cystic fibrosis? But the problem is it is not technically feasible always. That's the reason by virtue of exclusion, DNA test would be a more better option here. Coming to fluorosis, it is not the most common cause for the dental caries, and genu valgum can be caused by it. Nalgunda technique is defluoridation, and it can deposit over a long period of time in the skeleton, is what has to be remembered. Spinal tumors are of various types. They can be intramedullary. What are the three things you have to remember when it comes to intramedullary spinal cord lesion, doctor? Syringomyelia, glioma, ependymoma. These three are common lesions responsible for intramedullary. Then after intramedullary, what is there? You have extradural, intradural lesions. Generally extradural lesions are because of the metastasis, and typically most of the spinal tumors are extradural in location, generally because of the metastasis or even primary tumors originating in the spine. Primitive streak, typically the initiation and maintenance of it, what is required? First of all, we need to know what are the full forms of them, right? Otherwise it would be like placing the money in the stock market with a negative scoring available. So BMP is the bone morphogenetic protein, and it is the one which maintains the movement of the primitive streak, and it is a suppression in fact of this bone morphogenetic protein which is responsible. Now mivacurium, let us talk about it. Mivacurium causes a significant histamine release, which leads to vasodilatation, leading to hypo, not hypertension, as all of you know very well. Now coming to schizophrenia, you find third person hallucinations, running commentary, and these are very classical, and it is a disorder of the thought, as all of you know very well, and there is a pressure of speech, derailment and the flight of ideas, thought blocking, punning, word salad. We discussed in a great detail in our regular psychiatry session. So and another important thing is, do you find inappropriate emotions, inappropriate affect? Definitely. In which variety? Classically hebephrenic variety of schizophrenia, disorganized schizophrenia, you find classically the the inappropriate affect is what we need to basically identify. Axoplasmic transport is the one which is moving all the lipid synaptic vesicles and proteins across the nerve. You have one dynein which is responsible for the retrograde axonal transport. Then you have got a kinesin which is responsible for the anterograde axonal transport. Both of them are involved. Then you have got neurofilaments which are also associated, but the microfilaments are not exactly associated with the axonal transport. Where do you find microfilaments, doctor? Muscle contraction, ATP filaments, etc., etc. So that is the English about axoplasmic flow. Now let's go to the next question. Who is a type A personality, doctor? Many of us, we are all hostile, impatient, time conscious, and then highly competitive. That's the reason we got seat in MBBS. Incapable of relaxation, that is a very difficult thing, because to not relax is the best way to relax. Intrinsic insecurity is the underlying cause to be type A. It is not because you are a great, we are all great people, right? That is the underlying cause. And free floating hostility, they are all the problems. Now senile cardiac amyloidosis, it is the transthyretin which is the one which is being found. And what is Shocklund, doctor? Can you give one single word about it? ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, where if you happen to do the histology, you find a diffuse alveolar damage, interstitial edema, of course that is also given among the options. Okay, was it there in the options? No, it's not there. It was the imagination of the recaller. But the interstitial edema is found very much. Then pulmonary capillary congestion is there, hyaline membrane formation is there. These are all the important features. Neurofibromatosis, typically what are the features? Typically you have NF1 and NF2, doctor. Let us be sure on some concepts. NF1 carries a better prognosis than that of the NF2. NF2 has paucity of the cutaneous signs, and NF2 leads more often to the acoustic neuromas and meningioma formation. So optic nerve gliomas are in fact one of the most common intracranial features, malignancies that can be found in the case of the NF1. Where do you use biphosphonates? Biphosphonates inhibit the osteoclasts and prevents the resorption of the bone, as all of you know very well. So they are used in osteoporosis, Paget's disease, bony metastasis, multiple myeloma like malignancy. They are not used for that hypervitaminosis D is what need to be remembered. Let us talk about osteomalacia. This had been a very traditional question. Osteomalacia versus osteoporosis versus what else? Another common three differentials and Paget's. So how will be the alkaline phosphatase, calcium? These are all favorite topics for examiner. What is osteomalacia? Is like rickets, is vitamin D deficiency. Should have hypocalcemia, not hyper. So that's the reason A becomes the answer, obviously. But at the same time it has got a increased alkaline phosphatase, and it also leads to muscle weakness called the rickets myopathy, and serum phosphorus also is low because vitamin D is not there in the case of osteomalacia, and alkaline phosphatase is high, and this kind of loosus zones, which are the unmineralized areas leading to stress fractures, are what is seen in the case of the osteomalacia, is what need to be remembered. If there is a pectus excavatum, then when is the surgery indicated? Naturally, if it is impeding the respiratory reserve. Indirectly examiner is asking which ventilation value is suggestive of a severe kind of restrictive lung disorder or obstructive lung disorder, is what we have to make up. Otherwise, does pectus excavatum, if it does not cause any kind of respiratory ventilatory problem, does it require surgery? Not required, except for cosmetic purpose. The gentleman wants to marry, he can have a pectus excavatum lined up well. So basically, if the FEV1 by FVC is 70% or higher, it is called mild obstruction. If it is 60 to 69, it is called moderate, and anything between less than 60% is called moderately severe. That is the time where you have to go ahead with the operative correction of the pectus excavatum. Fractional excretion of the sodium, very important question for the examiner. How do you calculate that, doctor? Sodium in the urine divided by creatinine in the urine divided by sodium in the plasma by sodium in the creatinine plasma into 100. This and this into 100. Now, fractional excretion of sodium is greater than 1 means what? Urine is losing, that means tubules are bad, tubules are not conserving sodium. That means pathology lies with tubules. Suppose if the fractional excretion of sodium is less than 1, that means tubules are all right, they are conserving it. So the cause for the uremia is not tubular, it is glomerular and pre-glomerular in pathology. So that's the reason, doctor, value of below 1 means it is retained, and cause for the problem is pre-renal azotemia. More than 2 means problem with the tubular damage is responsible, is what need to be remembered. What is good clinical practice? To not do MRI for common cold. MRI of the paranasal sinuses is good clinical practice. So typically it is called the Helsinki's declaration, which said that if you are conducting trials, just because we give permission to do the trial, should not that you give chemotherapy and make half the race to become extinct. So basically it is the safety which need to be implemented in the clinical trials. Do you use human beings in preclinical animal studies? You don't. So there is a reason GCP recommendations doesn't apply for the rabbits, it applies for the Homo sapiens. So what do you do in the phase 1, doctor? Safety of the dose range, side effects, if the treatment shrinks cancer, these are all the traditional questions. Clinical trials, doctor, phase 1, 2, 3, 4. Why that becomes an inevitable question in examiner's question bank? Because it is the institute of a highest order of research. So they are given a Solomon's knife, you have to have this question included, you have to have immunization question included. So that is the reason they have to follow such rules. So we also should follow the same rule of preparing for it. Then hyaline cartilage typically has got type 2 collagen, and fibrocartilage has got type 1 collagen is what need to be remembered. One more question on chronic active hepatitis. It is IgM, it is a HBeAg, HBV DNA, they are the important markers of a chronic active hepatitis is what I like to underscore. If a patient has got a chronic hepatitis, when do you call active and inactive doctor? If he is inactive, he will have normal AST, ALT levels, and the HBV DNA, HBeAg, which are the markers of infectivity, will also be negative. But if the HBsAg, HBcAg of IgG type and HBeAg is also present, it is also a feature in chronic hepatitis. So active means you need to have ALT levels higher than AST, and which is a rise really more than 5 times, and you need to have HBV DNA which is positive, right. Hyperdense white matter lesion in thalamus, what is the diagnostic of? Before that, what is Krabbe's disease, doctor? It is autosomal recessive sphingolipidosis, where beta galactosidase is the one which is deficient, and typically it leads to development of demyelination, but the demyelinating plaques are more often seen in the not thalamus, brainstem and cerebellum in Krabbe's. Okay. Now, how the metachromatic leukodystrophy? It is a lysosomal storage disease basically, and sulfated glycolipids, ceramides are the ones which are depositing, and typically if you take a T2 weighted image like this, you can see the hyper intensity of the deep white matter. Now the question is, how can you say, looking simply at certain opacities like this, opacification like this, you can see here very clearly that it is a case of possibly metachromatic leukodystrophy. Will that pattern suggest you? Very much. Instead of this opacification being peripheral, it is more periventricular, which is a classical feature which is found in the case of the metachromatic leukodystrophy, one of the kinds of leukoencephalopathies. Then you have the Alexander's disease, which is a mutation of the glial acidic fibrillary protein, and Kenavan's disease, one of the options given was a problem with the aspartate acylase gene mutation. Now let us talk about ketoacidosis. We are hyperventilating because of acidosis, Kussmaul's breathing. Then there is a tachycardia because we are dehydrated in DKA, and that leads to development of reflex tachycardia, not bradycardia. Pain in abdomen can be a presenting feature of porphyrias, DKA, etc., etc., and tachypnea is also found. Now let us talk about the ulnar nerve. Ulnar nerve, our traditional concept. Without a question on brachial plexus injuries, there is no paper in entrance at all. So claw hand will be there, hypothenar eminence atrophy will be there, and what are the muscles which are being supplied by the ulnar nerve, doctor? Typically all the muscles, but you have what are called the median nerve muscles, that is opponents, lateral lumbricals, and flexor and abductor. These are the ones which are being innervated by the median nerve. So by this, but cutaneous innervation, what is the cutaneous innervation of ulnar nerve? Typically ulnar nerve will be not, it will be typically be the medial 1.5 digits, not medial 1/3. So probably that could be. But what are the options? Ulnar nerve injury at any level he has given, because there is something called ulnar paradox. If it is a higher level lesion, you don't find clawing. Is it the underlying basis of the question? Yeah, in the last, at the end of discussion, please give corrections of the frame of the questions. Now Hampton's hump, Westermarck sign, where do you see pulmonary embolism? Typically this kind of, initially patient was having dyspnea with the haziness, but within few hours there is a wedge-shaped infarct which is called the Hampton's hump, infarcted wedge-shaped hump, and if you happen to do the CT, you can see that there is a pulmonary oligemia which is called the Westermarck sign. Now our favorite question has come. Egg on side appearance. Who is the egg? Why it is that string like appearance is there? Basically heart is having what? The base of the heart is formed by aorta and pulmonary artery. In transposition of great vessels, what will happen? Right ventricle opens into aorta, left ventricle opens into pulmonary artery. And because of that, what will happen? The aortic knob, which normally constitutes a prominence here, become lost. That's the reason the aortic and pulmonary root become like a string. And that typically along with this heart will have a egg on string appearance is typically seen in transposition of the great arteries is what has to be fundamentally understood. Now the peptide sequence is different, but the similar structure is there. Then what is it called? It's called divergent. So if you take the various species, the protein sequence can diverge while the protein function remains the same, and this genetic phenomena is basically called divergence. Then cicatricial alopecia, standard question. What are the causes? You have lichen planus, cutaneous lupus, linear scleroderma, DLE, sarcoidosis, scarring. Whereas alopecia areata, tinea capitis, trauma and endocrine related are non-scarring. That's the reason alopecia areata comes under non-cicatricial is what has to be basically remembered. Water lily sign, classical question is seen in the case of the hydrated cyst, as all of you know very well. Now after a typhoid fever for 4 months, there is a sudden hair loss in the female. Then what is it an example of? Basically, doctor, I will take a couple of minutes of your time on this question. We have two phases, anagen, growth phase, catagen, which is the brief transition phase, and telogen, which is called the resting phase, in which the hair will be growing. So any stress in the body can reset this hair cycle, and this will cause a partial shedding of the hair for about 2 to 3 months after the stressor, which is called as telogen effluvium. You can see that there is a thinning across the frontal hair, which is very typical of the telogen effluvium, which can be seen after the labor, delivery, typhoid fever, any one such kind of condition. Similarly, rapid weight loss is also another predisposing factor. Now let us talk about the anagen effluvium. In this, there is a more extensive hair loss because the matrix cells from which the hair is growing, typically there is a disturbance in them, and that lead to fracturing of the hair shafts at the level of the scalp, which leads to development of anagen effluvium. Telogen effluvium is because of short stress. Then what causes anagen effluvium? Where there is a breaking of the shaft of the hairs. Cancer chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and once you remove these drugs, then once more the hair will regrow. Now the most important underlying pathological thing we have to differentiate is, in telogen whole hair is lost. In anagen it is the shaft which is being broken is what has to be appreciated. So if you happen to do a anagen effluvium hair examination, it has got a rapidly tapering configuration because of the breakage of the shaft, that's called the bayonet hair. But what you are seeing here is telogen effluvium. Telogen effluvium with the stress, there is a diffuse thinning of the entire scalp is what is typically being found. Now another common question asked is, out of these two, which is the one which is capable of causing a total alopecia? Typically anagen effluvium, the hair loss occurs because of the hair shaft being broken down, whereas in telogen effluvium it is the other way, that is the whole hair is being fallen down. The anagen effluvium is the one, the second one is the one which can involve up to 90% of the hair. That's the reason it is very much capable of causing a complete alopecia is what need to be remembered. That's the reason. What is your answer, doctor? It is basically telogen effluvium would be the correct answer over here. DPT is contraindicated with the history of the suffering from convulsion. C wave in JVP. JVP without a question, there is no paper. This question we discussed in lot of Sunday tests. That's the reason it does not require much of mention. A wave is atrial systole. C wave is when the ventricle is undergoing systole. There is a AV ring and tricuspid will bulge into the atria, and that causes a rise of pressure, which is called the typical C wave, and you have got the third one, that is a V wave, because the venous return into the atrium when the atrium is getting filled, that also raises the pressure, which is called the V wave. So A for atrial filling, ask me, is a easy way to remember, and you have got the C is systole, and you have a closed tricuspid X descent, and you have the maximal atrial filling called the V wave, which raises the pressure of it, and then it will undergo emptying of the atrium into the ventricle, causes the Y descent. You must be very sure about. So that's the reason, doctor, it is the bulging of the tricuspid valve which is responsible for the development of the said wave. Now let us go to the next question. Schizophrenia, third person auditory hallucination is being found, and I think we finished this question, right? Heart disease, Eisenmenger complex, if it is there, strict contraindication for pregnancy, as all of you know very well. Then hallucination means what? A sensory perception even without any stimulus only, whereas illusion is a misinterpretation of the given stimulus, and delusion is a false belief in spite of showing the contradictory evidence to the given individual. Now to assess the benefit of a task, whether it is achieving the objective, is called as, once more, SPM Park is English, evaluation. Can there be any other option? Is it input output analysis? Let us talk about that also. Okay. Basically, if there is any plan, any change in one part of the plan can cause a change in the other components of the plan and the system. Is called is basically being done in input output analysis. So that's the reason the best way is evaluation is the way to know whether the task is achieving what it is expected to achieve.